Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to our Garry Kasparov series. So in this series we're following Garry's life and his chess career, and we're back now in the 1986 World Chess Championship between Anatoly Karpov and Garry Kasparov. So we have covered so far this beautiful World Chess Championship match from 1984 and 1985 where Garry Kasparov became the youngest world champion in chess history, and now Karpov had of course the opportunity to get this throne back, but it didn't start really good for Karpov because he lost the round 4, and now we're in the round 5 where Karpov had the white pieces and had the opportunity maybe to equalize the result. This game is really brilliant because it shows, I think, the strength of Anatoly Karpov, because Karpov was really a great positional beast when he had opportunities to get really a good position. Then there was no turning point for you because he improved his pieces very easily. He squeezed you in a really tough way. So when it comes to positional chess, really Anatoly Karpov was really one of the best players in chess history. So let's check out now the game 5 from the 1986 World Chess Championship. It's, I think, really one of the best games even in the World Chess Championship history. So here Karpov opened with the move d4, and Kasparov's response was move knight to f6. We have c4, and we have now the move g6. And here I think it was already sort of a part of their preparation and their sort of mind game when it comes to opening preparation, because Garry Kasparov used to play very often the King's Indian and also the Benoni defense. So these two defenses still were popular back in the 17, back in the 80s, because now these days these openings are not so often played because of the evolution of computers. But back in the 80s, the King's Indian, for instance, still was a represented opening, and Kasparov really played it in a really wild way. But now after move g6 and knight to c3, here Kasparov goes into the Grünfeld, and the Grünfeld, in my opinion, is slightly better than the King's Indian, because you're breaking already in the center. You're not allowing your opponent to get some spaces in the center, because when you play bishop to g7 instead of d5, then of course with the move e4 white has always a central expansion. So that's why d5, the Grünfeld, is on the board. And here Karpov played now really one of the best ways against the Grünfeld, this defense, which is now the so-called Brinkman attack. We're bringing out the bishop very early, and now we want to play e3, knight to f3, bishop to e2, kingside castling, and we would have a decent setup. But the problem always when you leave in these types of structures the defense of the b2, then with bishop to g7 and queen to b6 or queen to a5, black will continue the pressure on dark squares. So especially against the square c3, if you can notice, the bishop on g7 would aim towards c3, and then also the queen would aim here to c3, or with the move queen to b6, the queen would attack the b2 pawn with the support of the bishop. Again, the main pressure is on these two squares. So that's why with the move bishop to f4, okay, you get a piece activity, but you're leaving also some weaknesses in your own position. So here bishop to g7, we have e3, and now comes this idea c5. So this move c5 is a preparation to play queen to b6 or queen to a5, getting the pressure on these two squares. So we have now d takes c5. Here Karpov undermines the pressure a little bit. It's, I think, very important to release the pressure a little bit in the center of the board, because what we can notice in this Brinkman attack is the lack of development on the king side. That's something I think that bothers white a little bit, because when we count now, we still need like 1, 2, 3 more moves in order to secure the king, in order to castle. Meanwhile, black will castle for sure, so black would be faster when it comes to king security. So that's why the Brinkman attack has, of course, the advantages, but like every opening, it has also its disadvantages. So here after move d takes c5, we have now queen to a5. So now Kasparov is continuing the pressure. He's saying you're not castle in this game, because now I'm going to destroy you also with some knight to e4 idea. So we have now rook to c1. This is now a normal idea, because as we said, the main pressure is around the square c3, so that's why you want to have a further control of this square. So here we have knight to e4, and this is maybe already a rushed attack. Here, for instance, now these days the most popular way is to proceed with the move kingside castling, and now after move c takes d5, here some ideas like knight to d7 are working. c6 is not an opportunity here because you don't get anything. Knight to e4 will happen for sure. Knight to c5 is going to happen. So with the control of this two knight, white could face many tactical problems. So that's why here, in my opinion, you should castle instead of this move knight to e4 that Kasparov played, but this was probably also part of Kasparov's preparation. He played simply this line. It's a more aggressive line, but here Karpov found really a beautiful way how to get out of this tactical mess, because with the move e3 we can notice we cannot play any more bishop to d2. We would love, of course, to play this kind of a move, but now it's not possible. So with the move knight to e4, here Karpov simply takes c takes d5, again releasing the pressure a little bit in the center. But now with the move knight to c3, now queen to d2. This is now the important intermediate move that you have to play, this using this pin by the queen against the knight. And now, okay, white get challenged here. Black can of course take queen takes a2, but now with the move b takes c3, here Karpov really found a beautiful way to release the pressure on the queen side, because you see Kasparov played really an aggressive method against this Brinkman attack. So here queen to d2, king to d2, and we can notice now, okay, the game is simplified, which I think favors here white. White has an extra pawn, white has 7 pawns on the board, black is only 6. Okay, these are not really the best of pawns. The d5 is weak, the d5 is weak, but these pawns can be improved. Of course, they can be supported with e4, then with the move c4, so white can really build sort of a central pawn storm. On the other hand, what we can notice also is that the rook got out of the range of the bishop. So that's why another c4 is also possible. Now I think white can rely simply on normal development, knight to f3, bishop to d3, a bishop to c4, bishop to b5, so the bishop still has good activities. So in my opinion, Karpov found really a beautiful way how to get out of this tactical mess that Garry Kasparov has prepared here. So here Kasparov continues with the move knight to d7. He has to pressure now against these weaknesses, against this weak pawns, because he is simply down a pawn. But that was his choice. He played really this sharp opening line. So here bishop to b5, castling, and now bishop takes d7. And here Karpov realized that this bishop, after move bishop to d7, are not the best of bishops. When we evaluate the bishop strength, we can always say there are 3 ways how to make a bishop look really look bad, because one of the best ways how to make a bishop look bad is of course to get out of the range. So when we play c4 here, then of course the bishop on g7 is not attacking anything. The other way to maybe paralyze the bishop is maybe lock the bishop with the move e4 and then e5. You see, then the bishop would be paralyzed by white pawns. But in my opinion, the best way how to make a bishop look really bad is to make your opponent to block him by its own pawn. So for instance, if you could just imagine the position when the pawn would be here on e6 and then also a pawn on c6, so when the bishop would be paralyzed by its own pawns. And that's exactly what Karpov will do here. So he'll make really this bishop look funny, because the dark square bishop will be paralyzed by white pawns, but the light square bishop will be paralyzed by its own pawn. So this is now really brilliant positional chess that Karpov will show us, because of course he didn't calculate everything basically here, but you have basically no better strategies than just to make this bishop look bad. So that's why here you understand what Karpov is doing here by understanding the bishop's activity of black. So here after move knight bishop to d7, we have now e4, we have now f5, and now we have e5. And now comes one of the critical moments of the game. Here Kasparov should have played simply rook from f to c8. He has to attack the weaknesses, and he should have stuck to his plan, because as we said in the beginning, white is up a pawn, you have to get your pawn back and then make something out of it. But here after move rook to c8, Karpov would probably play bishop to e3, then maybe e6 would be the correct way. Now after move c4, okay, you lost the pawn, but now with the move f4, bishop to g7, here still white has a dominant position in the center. Here probably knight to f3, then after something like rook to d8, we're waiting here black to take, e takes d5, then c takes d5, and with rook to d1 we could probably support the pawn and have still these 2 pawns connected. But that was, in my opinion, the only way that Kasparov could make some kind of a progress. At least the bishops are not so bad in this position. But with the move e6, here Karpov played now the move c4. Karpov had now also the opportunity to basically lock the game. He could have played simply rook to b8, b1, attacking the pawn on b7, and there's really not a good way anymore to protect the position. For instance, if you take here, e takes d5, then rook to b7 will happen. You can maybe attack, but now with rook to c7, we're attacking the bishop on c6. You have to protect it. Now takes, and we're getting simply knight to f3, rook to b1, and I think white has a comfortable game. So it's probably a winning game here for white for sure. So here in the continuation of the game, Karpov played now the move c4, which allowed here Kasparov again to play rook to c8, again to attack the weaknesses. Here in the continuation, we have rook from f to c8, and now a beautiful move by Karpov c6. And when it comes to computer evaluations, the evaluation is about equal, but that's not the point. Here Karpov got what he wanted to get. He paralyzes now the both bishops of Garry Kasparov. He paralyzed the bishop pair, because you know how Kasparov was really strong attacker. He used his bishops many times in such a beautiful way. But now after move c6, we have b takes c6, and look at this now, d6, and this is now such a beautiful position. Look at this, bishop is paralyzed by its own pawns. As I said, this is really the best way how you can make bishop look bad. And now on the other hand, this bishop is paralyzed by the pawn here on e5, so these bishops are out of game. So they're really just like pawns. It's really wild how things like this can happen. Although again, the computer likes also a little bit here a black's position, but that's not the point for human eye. I think this is a perfect game to play, because it's not so easy to break through. You can make ideas like h6 g5, but now this position can be paralyzed with potential h4 moves. Here the continuation, we had now c5, and that was now I think the critical moment of the game. Here Kasparov should have probably played g5 and get at least one of these bishops into the game. After bishop to e5, this is maybe playable, then maybe c5, this position can get protected. Still white is slightly better because of this supported pass pawn. This is a bad bishop, but g5 was the only way to make some kind of a progress. Unfortunately, he played now a passive move c5, and this allows now here Karpov to play the move h4. Never ever allow this g5 anymore by Garry Kasparov. So we have now h6, now knight to h3. Here Karpov controls further the g5 square. He doesn't want to take with the bishop the g5 pawn, because we have seen if we take with the bishop, then the pawn on e5 is hanging. So here in the continuation, we have now a5, and okay, Kasparov has now this pass pawn on the a file, but it cannot be supported by the bishop pair. That's I think the main issue here. If for instance this diagonal would be cleared, then this pass pawn would be so dangerous, because you see the square a1 would be covered by the dark square bishop. But now when the bishop is out of game, this is not such a strong pass pawn on the a file. So here we have now f3, we have now a4, and now rook to e1. And here Karpov is preparing really a beautiful maneuver. He's trying now knight to f2 and then knight to d3, where he could control further the e5 square. As we said, the only way for this bishop on g7 to come into the game is by taking out the e5 pawn. That's not possible, because here Karpov continues this paralysis on around the square e5. So here a3, we have knight to f2, we have a2, and now knight to d3. Beautiful maneuver of the knight. We have rook to a3, and now rook to a1. What Karpov is trying now to do is, of course, somehow to grab this a2 pawn. If that happens in a good way, if we grab the pawn and still hang on to our e5 pawn, then it's a perfect position for white. So here in the continuation, we have the g5. This was again a little bit too rushed. Probably rook to b8 slightly better. g5 doesn't bring you anything, because the e5 is protected. That was the g5 sacrifice worked only where black could have taken the e5 pawn then afterwards. Now it's not such a position, so after move g5, here Karpov simply takes h takes g5, h takes g5, bishop to g5, but the e5 is protected. So here we have king to f7, bishop to f4, again protecting here the e5 square. We have rook to b8, but now rook to c rook to c2, pardon me, rook to c1, preparing rook to c2, then attacking further the a2 pawn. We have bishop to c6, now rook to c3, trading off the rooks is now the main goal. We have rook to a5, and now after rook to c2, this game is practically over, because here you can maybe protect the rook, but now with knight to c1, this pawn cannot be protected anymore. The pawn will be taken, and white is simply winning the game. And in this particular point of the game, here it was where Garry Kasparov resigned. So he realized there's not a good way anymore to proceed here. The pawn will be taken, you cannot include the bishop. This bishop is bad anyway, so it can be maybe maneuvered here, but when the rooks are off the board, then this supported pass pawn on the d file is of course the main strength of white. So great game by Anatoly Karpov, but you see how Kasparov also had some opportunities that he didn't use, and this was now the time where Anatoly Karpov equalized in their World Chess Championship in 1986. So it was a huge moment of the World Chess Championship, because here Karpov showed again that he still got it. He had now also the opportunity, of course, to maybe get this World Championship match into his favor. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Really interesting positional ideas, how to paralyze the bishop pair. If you want to see more Garry Kasparov Karpov games, check out my Garry Kasparov series. Here's the link, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.